from Dr. Marlin. He did ask that we open this show with this song, and it's a beautiful song. Dr. Marlin.
Absolutely.
How are you, sir?
Oh, I tell you.
We are here.
Finally.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leaning In with Dr. Marlin right here on CCFM. It's a new show, new people that you will get to know in the next few months, every Tuesday from 6 to 7 on the dot. Diving into his book called Academia and Spirituality, an amazing book that I've been reading for the past 3 weeks and also having conversations on the site. I remember our last conversation, I think our first conversation was about 2 hours.
Yes.
And I was a little bit nervous about actually us being on radio and speaking for more than an hour. In my church, they know that I can speak for hours. I say I can speak until Jesus comes a lot of times. But it's an honor to have you with me.
Thank you so
much. And I'm
Phineas.
so excited, to engage with you in this amazing book. I remember reading it. I thought I was going to need a dictionary when I was reading it, but the way you simplified the whole thing was amazing for me. But anyway, welcome. Briefly, if you can introduce yourself. I know you are a father.
Yes.
You are a lecturer.
Yes.
You are a doctor.
Wow.
I don't know what else you are. Are you a dog lover? Are you a plant parent? I am that, by the way. But if you can introduce yourself briefly to the listeners and just welcome them into the space
Before I do, I just want to give a shout out to my buddy Jigger's heavenly birthday today.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was my dad's heavenly birthday yesterday.
Wow. How old is your father?
He is 75.
75?
Yeah,
Okay.
He lives on.
I hope I passed that.
Yes, look, it's not for the faint-hearted though.
But briefly, if you can just introduce yourself, tell your listeners who you are.
Yes.
This is your show. I'm just making sure that we get to the destination. But who you are, what do you do? Some people know you from UCT as a lecturer, but I think there's more to you than what you do.
Yes, I'm a senior lecturer at UCT.
Yeah.
I'm married to Heidi.
Okay.
We got a blended family.
Right.
Been married since 2018.
Amazing.
Yeah, love it to bits.
You love it to bits.
Yes.
I hope that you can also cook, which is something that I need to work on.
No, I love cooking.
You like cooking?
Yeah.
Pop and fleece?
Everything.
Look,
if it doesn't move, I eat it.
It doesn't move, you eat it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the length and breadth of my of what I like. I love the idea of just and it's not just about the food. It's about the creation.
The creation.
Yeah. It's how it got put together.
Yeah.
And they say that chefs pass on the emotion.
Yeah.
Especially at home.
I love that. I remember telling somebody that, sometimes when you pray for a cake, God does not give you a cake, He gives you the ingredients.
Absolutely.
Because it is in the making of the cake that you get to form a relationship with them. So I love that.
Absolutely. So we have, in our blended family, we have 4 kids.
Yeah.
2 boys, 2 girls, ranging from 27 years old to 21.
A grandfather yet or not yet?
No.
I can see a little bit of grey hair. So I thought,
there's
maybe
a lot
a
of grey hair.
Or is it coming?
Oh, no. Look, we strongly advise not at this stage.
Not to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I'm too young.
Yeah, but your book, it's an amazing book. If you haven't read the book, I would really recommend that you read it. It is called Academia and Spirituality, Where My Two Worlds Meet. Dr. Marlin, very fascinating, very interesting thing that came to my mind.
Yes.
When I read the title. Why did you feel the need to bring these two things together? Because I think we live in a society where sometimes these two things can be separated, but you felt the need to bring them together. The title of the book, what are the genesis of it?
Yes, the title of the book, interesting. It is first that, I must say at this point, that the book got downloaded.
All right.
It came out of the cloud.
Yes.
And it just downloaded into my heart.
Yeah.
And it took me 4 weeks to write.
Wow.
And then afterwards, I sat and I thought, what does this book tell me?
The amazing thing is that you wrote this book after COVID-19.
Yes.
Which a lot of people wrote a lot of books during COVID-19 because it was a little bit quiet.
Absolutely.
But you wrote it after the chaos.
Yes.
And in the midst of chaos, you had to be still and then write this amazing book.
Yes. So I wrote it during, and you won't believe it, my favorite sport, watching Tour de France last year.
Oh, wow.
And while I was watching the Tour de France, and I clicked away on my laptop. Sitting in the corner of my lounge with the sun coming through. Yeah. And that's where I spent most of my time.
Wow.
And I loved it.
And in the midst of that, you're lecturing as well.
So I lecture strategic thinking.
Okay.
And that's the capstone final year course
Wow.
for business science students.
Just to let people know, we will be talking about some interesting things that are happening in the world right now. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, in leadership, in strategy, in consciousness, I'm telling you, this is the show for you, because this is a show that you're going to be educated, that me and you are going to be leaning into the Holy Spirit, and obviously Dr. Marlin on the show. And the easiest way, if you would like to be part of the show, I'll give you the number on how you can be part of that. But today we're not going to be engaging so much on WhatsApp. It's an introduction of the show, and then I think next week we'll be doing a Q&A where you can get actually intimately involved when it comes to asking Dr. Marlin some questions. So you spoke about writing the book,
Yes.
in a private space.
Absolutely.
Alone. How long did it take you to write it?
4 weeks.
4
Yes,
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
I mean, you're a doctor. You have a PhD, so that
Yeah,
has to be
but
easy.
that doesn't. No, no. Look, we have the ability to waffle for 300 pages, but when we want to put meaning into a book, it takes a lot of thinking.
Meaning into the book. When you said meaning to the book, I realized that you were very careful with the words that you chose in the book.
Absolutely.
I thought, like I said, I needed a Greek and some Oxford dictionary to read the book. But actually, the way you broke it down, I was like, this is an academic person who has a PhD. But the way they wrote the book, I think even a grandma or a primary school child can actually understand.
And that's the idea.
Why did you intentionally choose the words that you chose, and why did you choose to simplify it? Because for me, when I read it, it doesn't sound academic.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is a book for everybody, not just for people who are educated.
I think first I need to just focus on that. I've realized what my purpose is. So my purpose is to take complex matters and simplify them.
Yes.
Complex, and there are lots of complex thinking and lots of models and paradigms in academia. And I'm sort of breaking rank, because I'm saying that this is easily understood for anybody.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it is to bring this message of leadership, this message of the Christ leadership model.
Yes.
Yeah, the message of that you don't need to have followers to be a leader.
What?
Yes.
That's news for me.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of time as leaders, we look back a little bit to check who's following us.
Oh.
Because what defines a leader somehow is who follows them.
Correct.
But is that a leader?
Well, look, who follows them? That could be sort of looked at from two ways.
Okay. Yeah.
The one would be and what normally falls into the category of management. So I have a checklist. There's a checklist that I have to
difference
complete.
between a manager and a leader. Let's
Absolutely.
go into that.
Yeah. So in my understanding, the manager follows a checklist. I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to keep the flock together, I've got to. Where leadership has got to do with that psychological safety that we're creating.
Wow.
It's about connecting. It's about what made Jesus Christ an awesome leader.
Yeah.
Is that, and he had his purpose. His purpose was what his Father's will was. That was his purpose.
Yeah.
And then secondly, but most importantly, he made it safe for his disciples to learn.
Speaking about safety, a lot of my work are based so much on safety, because I strongly believe that if people can feel safe, they can be transformed.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say that again. If people can feel safe, people can be transformed. It doesn't matter how broken you are.
Yes.
I mean, the story of the woman at the well.
Yes.
We spoke about it off air.
Correct.
Yes. That why did Jesus intentionally tell the disciples to leave
and go and get food?
For him to be alone with.
Absolutely. Because think about it. She was filled with shame. She was filled with this despair because she was that close to having leprosy, and the way they would treat lepers on the outskirts of society.
Wow.
Because of her lifestyle. He needed that quiet space with her to converse with her, for her to open up and not be afraid of anybody else hearing.
Wow.
Right?
He covered her.
He covered her. And that's where his love and
covers a multitude of.
Absolutely. And that's where the love covered her. His love and his grace. He gave her the opportunity to acknowledge.
Yeah.
We have that opportunity every day.
I'm usually very careful when it comes to correcting people. I remember somebody told me that, correction without connection feels like rejection.
Yes.
It is very important that, we are in relationship with people. before we try to criticize them.
Wow.
Because how they will receive that may be received in a different way, because there's no form of relationship
Absolutely.
in my correction.
I think what is interesting about the statement that you're making is that there are more things that we have in common than what we have different.
Yeah.
Than what they are differences.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we need to understand is that walk a mile in somebody's shoes. But guess what? First, be cognitive and be aware of walking a mile in your own shoes.
Imagine Jesus did that with us. He came in as a fully human being.
Wow.
Look, God came and he walked in our shoes, became human,
Yes,
humbled himself.
absolutely.
Those are signs of leadership, I guess.
Yes.
Safety, humility.
Here's the interesting thing, and I think what was true leadership,
Yeah.
a depiction of it, was the two disciples on the way to Emmaus. They were distracted by the chaos. They were distracted by Jesus died, our leader died. What is going to happen to us?
Yeah.
So they forgot the 3 years of teaching.
I call it 3 years of rehab.
Oh, yeah, and they genuinely, in that moment of the examination, they hit the blank. Right? And now we have that Jesus brings them back. But where does he bring them back? To a pivotal part where he says, when he starts breaking the bread, and they realize only he has that authority. So they didn't understand that they were supposed to be breaking bread in their sorrow.
Wow.
When they were lost.
Wow.
When they felt despair, they didn't break bread then.
Yeah,
They needed
yeah.
a reminder.
I think what I love about Jesus' leadership style is that he didn't only teach, he demonstrated.
All the time. And again, when you look at when you start reading the book, it says it speaks about the etymology, big word.
Big word. I need a dictionary for that one.
Yeah, look, I'll
Or
just tell you.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, look, it's just to say that it's about where the word comes from. You know, what is the understanding of the word?
Yeah.
And it comes from this English word, old word, ladere, which means the one who guides or brings forth.
The one who guides and brings forth.
Or brings forth. Now, can you imagine? Listen to those words and see Jesus in your mind's eye. The one who guides and the or he brings forth. And in Jesus' case, he did both.
As you're speaking, I'm having this image of a tree, a newly planted that is being, you know, back in the days when you're growing a tree, you have to put some rocks on the side to help it. You know, I call it discipleship.
Correct.
You know?
Correct.
But I think we live in a generation also, we don't take correction very well.
Yeah.
And discipleship very well, because somehow we get offended very easily.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll ask you this question. As a young person who wants to be a leader, how important it is for me to be led?
Very, very important.
Yeah.
In the book, we speak about this leadership.
Yeah.
And we understand that you as a young person don't need to start the program all over.
Right.
If you want to stand on the shoulders of giants, you got to listen to those giants.
Paul and Timothy.
Yes.
Not Saul and David.
No. Absolutely. You got to listen to the giants that are in your presence.
Yeah.
Because it's listening to those giants that you end up standing on their shoulders. And what does that mean? Is that you took these lessons that they have learned on board.
I love observing people, especially leaders, a lot of times, because I'd rather learn from their mistakes than to learn from my mistakes.
And that's the best part.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Parents, I mean, myself and my wife always talk about this. The kids don't need to knock their heads. Right?
Yeah.
They don't need to knock their heads.
Yeah.
They
the
will
road has already been paved.
Absolutely.
But when do you get to a point where you have to allow them to pave their own way rather than actually the parents paving the way for them and making them easy for them in life? I mean, the entitlement, of course, you know that. Because even the disciples felt a little bit entitled.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why they wanted to stand in the way of him dying.
Yeah, look, two things. I read somewhere and I mentioned this, that parents would prepare the path for their kids rather than prepare their kids for the path.
Ooh. Okay.
Right? So
let's go deeper.
Yeah, so when we understand that, we want to protect our kids. But at what cost? At the cost of them learning?
Wow. Somebody told me that when you do things for people, you stealing their self-esteem away from them.
Absolutely.
You become a thief.
No, absolutely.
Because you get to it's like doing push-ups for someone. Who gets strengthened most of the time is the person that's doing the push-ups. It's not the one that is observing.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And here's the worst part. We rob them of their experience. That's the part. Somebody says to me in my class and says, don't worry, Marlin, man.
Yeah.
You worry about your PhD. He picks up his mobile phone and he waves it around and he says, I have access to all the PhDs in the world. And I go, well done. But the biggest question I want to ask you is, does it give you the experience of the process of obtaining the PhD?
And I think only wisdom comes from experience. Comes from experience. Sometimes people say, man, you have so much wisdom, but they don't understand the pain that came with that wisdom.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, wisdom doesn't just come.
No.
It comes with a lot of pain.
No.
I just want to ask you this question.
Yes.
When you look at leadership, because sometimes people think leadership is about leading from the front, not from behind.
Yes.
Or besides.
Yes.
What does leadership look like for you? When you say you're leading people, what does the position look like?
The position for me is walking next to me. Walking next to me where I am. The greatest part of a leader, for me, one of the prerequisites of the leader is to engage every follower where they at.
Where they at.
Where they
Not
at.
where you think they should be.
Absolutely, where they at.
In the mess.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And we spoke about this before. You look at a wolf pack.
Yes.
Right? And they describe it so beautifully. Strong in front, weak in the middle, strong at the back.
Yeah.
But if you notice, where's the leader? The leader's always on a hill, looking at the topographical or the bird's eye view.
It's the visionary.
Absolutely.
The bigger picture.
Of where the pack is. So they can see the pack being threatened off from a distance.
So the leader basically sees what the followers don't really see and leads them to what he's seeing.
Absolutely. And that's why so many didn't want to follow Jesus.
Yeah, because some of us, we follow him for food.
Yes. Absolutely.
When the trouble comes, we say, no, we don't, I don't know you.
We're in this relationship with him because we want to benefit. And that is an issue. We want to sit.
We don't want the fellowship of his suffering. We want the benefits without commitment.
I think that we sort of we recreated Jews of the time of Jesus. Don't give us the suffering. Take the yeoman yoke away. That Roman yoke, remove that.
Wow.
Where's your horse? You come on a donkey. Where's your horse? Hey, where's your war horse? And you're wielding a sword or a battle axe.
Do you think we are all called to lead?
Yes.
All of us.
All of us.
Even kids.
Even kids. I tell you why. Leadership starts with me. I'm a leader without followers. I need to make decisions.
So even if you have 10 followers on Instagram, you're still a leader.
You're still a leader. Even if you have, like me, 0 followers on Instagram, you're still a leader.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do.
Yeah, it's Dr. Marlin Hoffman. So it's the understanding that, because what happens, and I've experienced this in my life, I tend to pep up my game when others are watching. And is that my authentic self? Or am I wanting to impress?
The performance mode. I mean, even in this space, we can go into performance mode.
Absolutely.
But are we ourselves in what we're doing?
Am I authentic?
Which I think that's what Jesus asked for. He doesn't ask us to pretend. He asks us to be authentically ourselves in our own brokenness. Sometimes I even think brokenness is holiness.
Yes. I heard this amazing thoughts on Sunday in church. And it was said, your community knows you well. Your church fellowship knows you well. Everybody knows you well because you're doing so much.
Yes.
But imagine God says, I know you not.
Woo. You see, if there's any scripture in the Bible that scares me,
it's that one.
It is that one.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of us are addicted to good works.
Absolutely.
As somebody that struggled with an orphan heart, that was my addiction.
Yeah.
I gained approval by doing good works.
Absolutely.
Until God was like, okay, you got to be like Mary now. So I'm a recovery master.
Okay. That's
Learning
a good
to be like Mary.
Yes. So you're finding your feet. You're
Yes.
finding your position at his feet.
Yeah.
So when we look at,
Pause there.
Yes.
Position at his feet.
we're finding the position at his feet.
A lot of
Yeah.
times we find that position in the world.
Yeah, look, the part of position at his feet happens in two ways. You're either sitting down or you're laying down.
Mm.
Now that speaks a lot about my demeanor,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
If I take that example and I use it from my ego.
Yeah.
My ego wants to stand up all the time. My ego wants to be right all the time.
Yeah.
My ego says, Marlin, you are the best,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But when does my ego sit down? When does my ego lay down?
Wow.
And at Jesus' feet, that's important. Because now it's not about the task that I need to do.
Yeah.
It's about the purpose.
Mm.
Where does this lead us?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes, I can be. And again, this understanding of me being a leader
Yeah.
within myself.
Yeah.
Because I decide, am I praying today?
I mean, also, how can you lead others if you cannot lead yourself? You know, how can you help other people heal if you're not healed?
Ah, that's beautiful.
So how do we become an example? You know, because a lot of times when it comes to leadership, it is. I think somebody told me that when it comes to leadership, people don't pay attention to what you say.
Yeah.
They watch you.
Yes.
And I think it's the same thing with children. You know?
It is.
So how do you balance deeds and words when it comes to leadership? Because sometimes some people are very good at speaking but are not good at acting. But some people are very good at acting but not good at verbalizing their leadership.
You know, my wife always says to me, your behavior will never lie.
Whew.
Your behavior is who you really are.
A lot of quotes this evening.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so what is interesting about it is that I, for a moment, thought, for many years, I thought that the greatest commandment was only said once. Love God above all, with all your heart, all your soul, and your neighbor as yourself.
Starts with self.
Yes, but here's the thing. It is also quoted in Leviticus. So it's given to the old and the new.
Let me correct myself here, because I said it starts with self. But should we say it starts with God, and out of the overflow of our relationship with Him, we are able to love?
Well, let me look at it. Let us look at it like this.
Yes.
Right. So firstly, we learn to love God as little children.
Yeah.
Do you love God? Yes, I love God, teacher. and you make a tick.
Yeah.
You get asked, where are we going to today? Oh, we're going to church. Why? We're going to praise and worship.
Yeah.
It's for God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tick. Then we move on in our existence, and then we love our neighbor. You know, you got to play nice with your friend Phineas, because you guys are buddies. You got to love each other. You got to be nice, brothers and sisters. You know, the sibling rivalry and all that. You got to play nice.
You remind me, all men will know you are my disciples if you love one another.
So we go tick. But nobody pays attention, and even in preaching, to loving yourself. Because loving yourself is the gold standard.
Yeah.
That is where the
It sounds also a little bit selfish, though. When you speak about self, a lot of times we're like, so what is the difference between selfish
and self?
Yeah.
Self is the authentic Marlin. It's the Marlin without badges, the Marlin without ideas, the authentic Marlin. So Christ speaks about loving yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, that's the practice ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can I love my neighbor? Because he says, how can you say you love God and you don't love your neighbor? And then I take it a step further and I go, but how can I love my brother? How can I love my sister, my wife, if I don't love myself? So I speak about this in the book, and we do this exercise, and I ask you, Phineas, 5 things that your significant other would want. And you give it to me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes, yeah.
But if I say, give me 3 things, Phineas, that you would want for your next birthday, you'll go,
I become the whole false humility thing comes in.
Absolutely. And guess what? Because we didn't spend enough time with the self.
I've seen this a lot of times, even as leaders. We're very good at asking for help for other people, but we're not very good at asking for help ourselves.
Yes.
Because we want to be perceived as heroes. But hold that thought.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you just tuned in, This is Leaning In with Dr. Marlin right here on CCFM. My name is Phineas Hwaswatsane, and we're going to be with you from now on until 7 on the dot every Tuesday. I know some of you'll probably have some questions, you probably want to comment, but we will leave that for next week, where you will be doing a Q&A with Dr. Marlin. So if you would like to start sending us some questions on leadership, on the things that we're speaking about, please make sure that you do that. And the number to be able to do that is our WhatsApp number, which some of you might already have memorized, but it's new for me. So I'm just going to read it. It is 061-7898-1075. That's the number, Dr. Marlin.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can engage
number
with us and send us WhatsApp messages, questions, and I will make sure that Dr. Marlin next week gets to engage with you on the show. Dr. Marlin, let me play a very interesting one of the songs. I mean, you had your song.
Yes.
Right? I also have my song.
Awesome.
You know, by Matthew West, Unashamed.
Great stuff.
And I think this song is a great song for what we're actually talking about. How do we become unashamed as Christians in the spheres that God is calling us in? Especially somebody like you who's at UCT. How do you walk proudly as a Christian? You know, and that's the next question that I'm going to ask you, is that, are you a lecturer that is a Christian, or are you a Christian that is a lecturer? Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy this song and we'll come back. For it is because sometimes within the spheres that we are in, you know, we get to leave Jesus at home. You know what I'm saying? You know, we only take him on Sunday. And I think this conversation with Dr. Marlin is about being, you know, unashamed as a Christian within the spaces that God calls us in. You know, and there's always this conversation, Dr. Marlin, about, you know, sacred and secular, which is terms that I don't really like. You know, that Phineas, you are in a secular world. The radio sometimes for some people is regarded as you are in a secular world.
Yes.
But for me as a Christian, if I go into a secular world, that place will become sacred because a Christian is there.
Yes.
You know, and I love that you brought spirituality and academics, you know, and married them together.
Yes.
And said, hey, there's actually no separation. That's why I was asking that, are you a lecturer that is a Christian, or are you a Christian that is a lecturer?
I'm first a Christian. And I've never realized that until I wrote this book. Until I named the book.
Yeah.
I was sort of afraid of my Christianhood. You know?
Yeah.
And in the book I mentioned that, what is the meaning of Christian?
Yeah.
Little anointed one. And the difference is that now I want to be a spirit-led little anointed one.
Wow.
Right? So that even when...
Because what is a Christian without the Spirit?
Absolutely.
That's why I think that the disciples became Christians when the Holy Spirit came upon them. I mean, that's when they were called Christians.
Yes.
But it was a mockery.
Correct. Correct. So when I lecture, I don't think there's ever time when I'm not praying.
Oh, wow.
You know, while I'm lecturing. You know, that it's... that people think that conversations only take place on a physical or physiological realm. You know, we give off energy.
Yeah.
Our souls are entangled.
We are spiritual being having a human experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we miss that. You know, we miss this understanding of that, the power of our words. You know,
in the beginning there was the Word.
Absolutely, and the Word was God. And what is interesting about that, God tells Moses, I am. I am who I am. And for me, the I am is the most powerful creation words.
Wow.
Right? I am tired.
Oh.
I am sick. I'm sick and tired. I am this. I am that.
We're prophesying.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow.
Okay? Because poverty is not what is around us. Poverty starts in our mind.
As a man thinks, so is he.
Absolutely. And there we need to combat. That is what we need to. I struggle with it because in my thought life, I thank God every day that I'm not walking around with a screen in my head.
Wow.
That displays my thoughts. I mean, I could cause accidents. You know.
No, today, trust me, I was thinking a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But my heart has to stop me from thinking like that.
So that part of it, you know, that very, very salient part of my thoughts determine, and I developed this little model, and I'll tell you again about it. The book speaks about it.
Yeah.
Is that my narrative determines my behavior? The voice in my head determines my behavior.
Wow.
My behavior determines my environment.
Is there a part where you speak about trauma in your book? Because now you're going a little bit deeper.
Yeah, look, I'm leaving that for part 2 or part 3. Eh?
Yeah, we will get there.
Yeah, look, it's first leading everybody to this understanding.
Yeah, but you were also speaking about how important it is to lead ourselves first before we can lead others.
Absolutely.
Why do you emphasize so much on self-leadership before other leadership?
Because self-leadership is underpinned by discipleship. The word discipline comes from disciple. Right?
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yeah.
How many times are we really disciplined? That we lead ourselves. I mean, I've met people over the last few weeks that are terribly ill. But they continue with their lifestyles.
Yeah.
I was told on a few occasions, you know what, dude, you got to lose weight.
Yeah.
And I smile, and my rebuttal is always, but who's going to buy me new clothes? Because the clothes are not going to fit.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Change costs.
Yes.
It costs.
And I, so wrongfully, we look at it from a materialistic point of view.
Yeah.
But we don't look at the cost that happens within me. The cost that I need to bear.
And that's why I think you spoke about, leadership so much. I mean, I didn't like this quote from John C. Maxwell when he said, everything falls and rises on leadership. I had to think about it, and then I realized actually leaders hold space.
Absolutely.
And based on the leader, you can either go down or go up, depending on who's leading you. I think that's why leadership is considered one of the most, you really need to know that position comes with a responsibility and accountability at the same time.
Absolutely. And in the book I speak about this dance between the leader and the follower. There's a big dance between the leader and the follower.
Yeah.
Because this happens at so many levels.
Right.
So the interesting thing is, and this is the question I always have, is that how many at work actually praise for their manager to do a good job?
Wow.
Because if that's the leader that is there in the positional power, how many of us actually pray that is successful?
You're speaking about, a lot of times somebody, it's one of those things that I write on social media that, if you're not praying for your pastor, don't criticize him.
Simple.
If you're not praying for your leaders, don't criticize them. Because God calls us to pray for our leaders.
Absolutely.
Whether we like them or not.
Yeah.
David did that with Saul.
Yes.
Where he had to play music.
And sometimes we realize that the leader is there to challenge me spiritually. I speak and
leaders, I think some leaders reveal things inside of us.
Yes. Things that resonate with them. Things that I found, things that resonate with me about somebody or irritates me about somebody are actually things within me.
When you get triggered, it's not me. There's stuff that I'm triggering out of you.
Yes, out of me. We get into this power struggle.
The power struggle of Saul and David.
Absolutely. And it happens within us every day. And yet we change roles when we're at home because we lead our kids. And then we expect that the blessing that is attached to me praying for my leader at church or my manager at work or wherever where I find myself, and I don't pray.
Yeah.
Do unto others that you want done to you.
And sometimes, to be honest with you, I've seen this within myself as well. It's like when you are not in that position of power, it's very easy to criticize. It's like, soccer players, when they're on the field, we're very good as fans at pointing fingers until we are asked to be on the field.
Absolutely.
And then fingers cannot even run for 90 minutes.
True. I look at... And I don't want to preempt in part of the book.
Yeah.
But I want to use the example of, and this is the crazy part, is that when I was a co-driver, I criticized every decision that the driver took.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. The day I got into the driver's seat, I wanted to give up.
Yeah.
Because there were so many things I need to look at.
Yeah.
Besides clutch control and changing gears, I need to look in mirrors. I need to look at the speedo.
I have a lot of respect right now, for radio presenters, because I'm like, sheesh, the machine that me and you are in front of.
Yes.
You know, what it takes, actually, the gift and the skill, you know, to be able to do this work is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes it's very easy when you don't see it and you criticize until you're put on the field. Then you're like, wow.
Yes.
This is amazing.
And that happens with so many things in our lives. And most of the things we criticize is born out of an idea that we can do it better. An idea that we can do it better.
Yeah.
Where we even overestimate ourselves.
Yeah.
Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
I would have done the other thing. But you didn't see the car coming on because I'm blocking your view.
Yeah.
Or you
I mean,
didn't-
the same thing you see it with Jesus a lot of times. You know, a lot of the people who followed him, they wanted to be ahead of him.
Yeah.
You know, they wanted him to do things that he was not intended to do.
Absolutely.
You know, and he has to be stubborn about his purpose and what he came here for. Imagine if Jesus listened to people. That's why I like this scripture from when Jesus was baptized. I remember someone was preaching and then they said this, that the reason why Jesus didn't seek approval from man is because he was approved by the Father.
Absolutely.
Because he said, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased with.
Absolutely.
And that's before Jesus did any ministry, by the way.
Correct.
Before Jesus did anything, he was already defined.
No, absolutely.
You know, so are leaders defined by what they do?
Yes. Absolutely.
So how do you balance between being and doing?
Easy. Why must we put being and doing on polar opposites? How about being while we're doing? How about the next time you're doing dishes, that you actually present enough to feel the water in your hands, that you feel the plate that you're washing?
I told somebody that dishes are therapy for me, and they were like, what?
Say again?
Washing dishes are therapy for me.
It's therapeutic. And guess what? When does praise and worship come in while we're doing dishes? Thank you for the food we ate. Thank you that we could do this. Thank you for the strength.
And I think there's a scripture that speaks about whatever you do it as if you do it unto the Lord.
Absolutely.
Everything that we do is an act of worship. It depends who are we worshiping in the doing.
So doing and being should not be separated.
I love this. Listen, we can talk for hours. I don't want to go, but I have another question that I need to ask you. Are leaders born or made?
Interesting. I believe in my heart that it can be both. It can be both.
Yeah.
Leaders that are born, or we perceive them to be natural leaders, they still need to be refined. Yeah. They still need to be refined.
So even when you're in a position of leadership, you still need to go to school.
Absolutely. No. Look,
I'm a leader. I've arrived.
No. Eagles need to learn how to fly.
Oh, wow.
Eagles need to learn how to hunt. So don't think it's just because you have the title of an eagle.
Yeah.
Because I promise you, if you are born out of an egg and you're an eagle and I put you in a chicken coop, you're not going to learn how to fly.
I mean, I think that's why they say readers are leaders. So you always constantly have to be
absolutely
being a disciple. I like the word disciple means being a learner, being a student.
Yes.
You know.
And this is the thing, that our leaders should never outgrow being a follower.
Say that again.
A leader should never outgrow being a follower.
So to be a great leader, you need to be led.
You got to be an awesome follower.
Wow. To be a great leader, you need to be a great follower.
Absolutely.
How do we do that? Practically, how does it look like?
It's just about sitting...
It's mentorship?
Yeah. Well, it's just about sitting back and saying, firstly, that I'm here to learn. I'm on this journey to learn.
Yeah.
A leadership position or a leadership title does not mean I've arrived.
I mean, you shocked me when you said, actually, when you got your PhD, you realized there's more to learn.
Absolutely. There's much more to learn.
You didn't arrive.
That was the first step of the fraternity.
So if you have a PhD or you do a master's, you must know that, there's a mountain at the top after this mountain.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And there will always be mountains. Because we now move away from it being accredited by institutions to being accredited by Christ.
Wow.
And that journey of life those mountains that we climb in the journey of life, nobody will see the accolades, nobody will see the titles till the day that he fetches his own. so it remains hidden.
Wow.
He even speaks to it, and he says, "Hey, look, dudes, why are you fasting and you're looking like you're dying?" You know, I mean, I use my words.
Yeah.
You know, you got to freshen up.
Yeah.
You got to look good.
Yeah.
Because it's a personal thing. It's a thing that I need to embrace. Marlin needs to embrace this fasting.
Yeah.
Fasting from those things that separates me in my relationship to Christ.
You know, one of the most interesting things that I've learned about leadership is that Jesus, when he left, he told the disciples that you will do greater things.
Yes.
You know, and in your book you speak about Jesus starting with his ministry without money.
Yes. Look, and awesome, because the book is written on the concept. That I joked about, and I mentioned it quite in detail in the book, as Jesus is the greatest entrepreneur that ever lived.
The greatest entrepreneur that ever lived.
Yes, he started his father's business with 12 men.
Yes.
No money, and it's still in existence 2,000 years later.
I think missionaries need to hear that again.
Right. Greatest entrepreneur that ever lived. Started his father's business. 12 men, no money, and it's still in existence today.
But I think he had a minister of finance, aka Judas.
Yeah, that sort of didn't work out well for Judas.
But I think Jesus is also fully funded by women in his ministry.
Yes.
He had support.
No, absolutely.
Wow.
He had an entourage of women that took care of the business of church.
Wow.
You know, you have church business and you have the business of church.
And difference?
Yes. Church business is the organizational blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right, that's church business.
Yeah.
But then you have the business of church. That is when we start bringing testimony.
Right.
That's when we start sharing our joys, and we share this. So there's distinct
when the
differences.
word becomes flesh, when there's testimonies, when there's signs and wonders and miracles, because he said, "Those who believe in me will."
Yes, he says, "Where 2 and 3 gather in my name." But here's the funny part. Where there's only 2 and 3 that gather, I say there's trouble.
Okay.
But the moment there's 2 and 3 that gather in his name, different outcome.
Keyword, in his name.
In his name. That is the essence of leadership. That it is not a point of arrival. It's a point of departure.
Say it again.
It's not the point of arrival.
Yeah.
It's a point of departure.
We will need to break that down next week.
Yes.
That's very deep. Listen, if you just tuned in, this is Phineas Sibatsani hanging out with Dr. Marlin, diving in his book called Academia and Spirituality, where two worlds collide. And I love that he saw the importance of not just writing an academic book, but a book that is rooted in the Spirit. And as you read the book, you will realize, he was very intentional with the words that he was using. And I will really recommend that you read it at some point, or you get the book. And next week will be, we'll open it up for discussions, for questions. If you have some of those questions now, please make sure that you send us some of those questions. We appreciate some of you who are engaging so far. We really appreciate it, and the encouragement. Me and Dr. Marlin, we're very new into the space, and we appreciate the warm welcome. If you just tuned in right now, the number to engage us with on WhatsApp is 061 798 1075. That's how you can connect with us. Dr. Marlin, in Sepedi, where I come from, they say meaning the time has been eaten by rats. So we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time. But I have a question for you that I think is very important for me as a young person, learning how to lead and to be led. The importance of, because for me, I can tell that somebody's a shepherd if they smell like sheep.
Yes.
I don't trust anybody that calls themselves a shepherd and they don't smell like sheep. What is the importance of actually of leading with, not for? What the importance of being with the people that you lead in the relationships, because I believe Jesus was very relational in his leadership.
Yes.
He was not distant. He was not leading from a phone. He was not parenting and discipling from a phone. He was in proximity with the
Yes.
disciples. How important is that when it comes to leadership, to lead in proximity? Because,
Wow.
you know, I think for me that's very important. That's my experience with that,
Yes.
working with homeless people, that, you know what, the minute you connect with people and trust gets built, it becomes very easy for people
Yes.
to be led. How important is it for leaders not to lead from their phone or from a distant, but actually to live in proximity with the people that they actually say that they are leading?
I think for me, I like creating a picture. World War One, there's trenches.
Yeah.
We know that the enemy, as they dug in,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the orders to advance.
Yeah.
And we know we're going to die. What is the message that the leader gives to those that he knows is going to lead to imminent death? What is that message he gives them? And
Yeah.
that is something I often think about.
Yeah.
And guess what's the message? He gets out of the trench first.
Ooh.
That is the message.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
yeah.
builds courage.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
builds conversation.
Yeah.
It's for me to say, you know what,
Yeah.
Phineas, I'm actually sorry. You know,
Mm.
and this is genuinely how I feel about it. You
Mm.
know, it's, we can have all the education in the world, but
Yeah.
if we're not humane, and read about it in the book as well, because I sort of develop this understanding of what humane means.
Yes.
You know, it comes to the core of my being,
Yeah. Yeah.
of who I am authentically.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I need to peel away the ego to get to me authentically.
The ego of what will people say or what will people think, you know, because sometimes we live out of that.
Yes.
You know, what will people say? What will people
Yeah.
think if I'm being authentic? I mean, we live in a world you can easily get cancelled
Yes.
or rejected if you are being yourself. I mean, we tell people, be yourself. But when people start to
Yeah.
be themselves, we say not like that.
Yeah. Be yourself within these parameters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's the leader must show this first.
Yeah.
I need to be vulnerable.
What kind of leadership do you think? Vulnerability and leadership.
Wow.
You just stabbed me right there, because sometimes we think vulnerability as a leader makes you a weak leader, you know, and we look up to all these leaders who are very,
Yeah.
you
Manly
know.
and aggressive and testosterone
And
full.
then you look at David and his brothers, you're like,
Yeah.
the God looks at the heart. What kind of, just in closing in 1 minute, 2 minutes, what kind of leaders do you think we need in our country, in a context of what is happening right now in the world?
Yeah. I think we need leaders that opens themselves up to firstly to the contextual reality of what is. We first need to take a photograph of where we are at
Wow.
before we can develop the roadmap for what we want to do. And if leaders are authentic enough to say, in this context, here, guys, here's where we're at.
Yeah.
We've hit a crossroads. We at this point in time where we don't know what to do as leaders.
Can a leader say that? Because to say I don't
Absolutely.
know as a leader,
Absolutely.
wow.
Because somebody will step up. Somebody will be a leader in that context.
So a leader doesn't have to know everything.
No, he doesn't need to
They just
know
need to
everything.
be connected.
He just
with,
needs to facilitate
Ooh.
this understanding amongst everybody
that
else.
we're doing it together.
We're doing this together.
That I don't
guys.
have a weakness. Actually, my weakness is somebody else's strength.
I love this understanding of what they use in special forces. They call it Chinese parliament,
All right.
where everybody gets a chance to speak and share their view
Wow.
based on experience. I've been here before.
Yeah.
This is the way we did it the last time.
Yeah.
Wow, great. Let's try it that way. Yeah, but too many times I leave it there. I leave it there because that goes on to have another 4 discussions.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Phineas Wahasubazani. I'm going to go into Dr. Marlin. He's going to give you a little bit of details on how you can get hold of his book. I'm reading this book. I'm not actually reading it. I'm actually studying your book, you know, because I want to, you know, implement some of the stuff that you're actually talking about, especially as somebody who wants to pursue that area of leadership. So, Dr. Marlin, do you have any contact details, any email or anything that you would like to
Absolutely.
share with our listeners?
I give you my
So that, you know, maybe next time when we are talking about these things, they actually have a textbook Because
Yes.
it's one thing for the lecturer to have the textbook, but it's another thing for the student to also have the textbook so that they can highlight in it. How can they get hold of you?
It's
How can they get your book?
readily available. So I have a WhatsApp, a WhatsApp number 073 011 5617 073 011 5617, or you can just email me at info@ignite -e.com. That's how you get hold of me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry about this. I want to talk. I want to ask more questions and dive into this book with Dr. Marlin. But hey, you are with us for a couple of months. So don't worry. We'll make sure that we engage with you every Tuesday from 6 until 7 on the dot. From myself, Dr. Marlin, and the Holy Spirit, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your messages that you've been sending through. We really, really appreciate it. There's more to this. There's more to this. I'm telling you, there's more gold and diamonds that we're going to be digging together every Tuesday from 6 to 7. From myself and Dr. Marlin, God bless you and have an amazing evening.